Well, folks, big news on the Claude front. Anthropic just dramatically increased the token limits for Claude, and some tiers we're talking about more than a tenfold jump overnight. Now, this is a brand new story here. This comes on the hinges of the SpaceX compute deal that just took place. And I think the actual numbers here are worth walking through because the scale of what's happening is kind of wild. If you've been using Claude Code or building on the Claude API for a while, you probably run into rate limits. We all have. And the rate limits in Claude basically define how much you can interact with the model within a given time frame. How many tokens you can send in, how many tokens you can receive back. And in Claude's Code's case, this includes how many requests you can run over a 5-hour window. Now, these limits exist because AI compute is genuinely expensive overall, and managing server load does matter to make it more efficient for everybody. But here's the thing. When you're a developer who's actually building something on the API, or let's say you're using Claude Code to do some serious coding work, those limits will hit you very, very quickly, and it's going to inhibit how fast you can create projects. The peak hour restrictions make it even worse. They have these peak hour restrictions in place where certain times of the day, it's a lot more expensive to run operations, typically in the morning time in the USA, for example. But because Anthropic has been quietly building out its infrastructure for a while now, it has deals in place with Amazon, Google, and others. Changes are being made, and I think it's worth noting how this affects the average user. So Anthropic announced a new compute partnership with SpaceX, and it's not a small one. They've secured access to the entire compute capacity of SpaceX's Colossus 1 data center. And it's a facility that houses over 220,000 NVIDIA GPUs, adds more than 300 megawatts of compute capacity to Anthropic's infrastructure overall. Now, that's tremendous. That means they can operate a lot more efficiently. Hence, the token usage can be made a little more doable for the average user. And the immediate upgrade for Claude Code users is that Anthropic is doubling the 5-hour rate limits across all of their tiers. So this includes Pro, Max, Team, and even seat-based enterprise plans. So if you're hitting a ceiling on how many coding sessions or tasks you could run in a given window, that ceiling just got pushed way up. And on top of that, they're removing the peak hour limit reductions for Pro and Max users entirely, which is really good news to hear. So that second part's honestly extremely important because for the average Joe like you and me, now your limit is your limit regardless of when you're working. Everyone's working on different time zones and different periods of the day and working remotely. So it's nice to not be sequestered to certain periods throughout the day. And you can now kind of do it when you need to do it. You don't have to worry about cost increases. Now, as far as the API token limits go, this is where it gets really interesting. The increases here are pretty massive. They apply specifically to Claude Opus model users. So at tier 1, which is where a lot of the smaller developers and early stage builders would sit, the input tokens per minute went from 30,000 to 50,000. So that's more than a 16-fold increase roughly. And output tokens jumped from 8,000 all the way up to 80,000 per minute. So that's the 10-fold amount there. Tier 2 went from 450,000 to 2 million input tokens per minute. And the output tokens moved from 90,000 to 200,000. Now, tier 5 is now 5 million input tokens and 400,000 output tokens per minute, which is great. And then tier 4, the top tier of it all, went from 2 million to 10 million input tokens per minute, with output tokens doubling from about 400,000 to 800,000. So now these changes went into effect immediately, so you should expect to see them right away. Now, from a broader standpoint, Anthropic also flagged, in this same announcement, Anthropic also flagged that they have a 5 gigawatt agreement with Amazon, and this is going to include nearly 1 gigawatt expected by the end of 2026, as well as a separate 5 gigawatt arrangement involving Google and Broadcom coming online in 2027. Plus, they have a $30 billion Azure partnership with Microsoft and NVIDIA. So there's a lot going on here over the next few years. The SpaceX deal is just one piece of a much larger compute build out, but it's a very immediately effective piece, if that makes sense. So separately from all of this, there was a Bank of America report that dropped this week showing how Claude's web traffic grew approximately 715% year over year, just in April alone. So that reaches just over 7 million US visits. Now, the month over month growth is about 28%, which is the highest growth rate among the major AI models right now. ChatGPT is still much larger overall, but its month over month growth has slowed significantly. It's down to about 1%. Gemini grew 8% month over month. So Claude is really gaining ground. And I don't know, from my perspective, at least working in SEO and AEO and digital marketing, I'm hearing a lot more clients mention Claude these days than ChatGPT. This is probably the first month I've noticed that clear distinction. Before, they knew a little bit about Claude, but they didn't know a lot about it. Now, a lot of them have purchased subscriptions. They've asked me about how to use Claude features, and I've consulted with them on that. So I'm hearing a lot more buzz around Claude than I have ever before. So I can substantiate that growth rate. It's definitely real. So I think the biggest positive change from all this is going to come on the development side and people who use Claude's API, where the old limits were a genuine bottleneck on productivity. If you were trying to process, let's say, large documents and run batch tasks, or even build an agent pipeline, an agentic pipeline, you were using thousands of tokens per minute. And especially if you're using Claude Code, forget about it. But I think the combination of doubled time limits and no more peak hour restrictions means your whole experience should feel meaningfully less interrupted, which is going to be way more productive for all of us. And the competitive angle is real. The OpenAIs of the world, even the Googles of the world, they're all racing to build out infrastructure as quickly as possible. The one who can reliably handle the largest workload at the lowest latency is going to win that developer platform game overall. And Claude, with its 28% month-over-month growth and all of these deals it's making with these massive S&P 500s, it's going to be really interesting to see where things are at in a year and how is ChatGPT maintaining relevance, and not only maintaining relevance, but growing in a year will be fascinating. But once again, if you guys are a fan of this kind of content, drop a comment, subscribe, and we'll see you again real soon. Peace.